Welcome back to another episode of TA Outdoors. With the popular 10 Bushcraft knife skills video, you guys pestered me to make an axe version, and so, by popular demand, here are 10 Bushcraft axe skills. For the majority of my time in the woods, I tend to take a 20-inch axe. This particular axe is a Halterfors hunting axe. On some occasions, I also take a small carving hatchet for bushcraft projects, and so, this video will focus on the skills that can be done with these two axes. You'd be surprised the size of log that a small axe like this can chop. On first glance, this particular log seems far too big to split with just a small forest axe. However, you can apply some simple physics to help split it in half. Even the hardest of swings at this log is unlikely to split it first time. But if you bury the head of the axe just off the centre of the log, and then lift the log onto your shoulder, rotate it so that your axe bit is now facing towards you, and let the weight of it fall onto your axe, it should split fairly easily. The way this works is that the weight of the log is far heavier than the weight of the axe head. Therefore, you can only apply so much downward force when driving the axe into the log, and clearly it isn't enough to split the log. But by reversing the forces used and allowing the log to be driven down onto the axe with its own weight, it will apply a much greater force to the splitting process. Naturally, I would never approach splitting a log this big in the first place. However, here is a slightly smaller log that is still fairly ambitious for this small forest axe to split. A splitting maul would handle it no problem, but the narrow profile of the Swedish-made forest axe just doesn't have the splitting power. So again, I drive it into the top of the log, lift it up near the axe head, and heave it down onto the chopping block. It's a fairly satisfying way of splitting a log, but it's not worth putting your back out trying to lift the log each time. You'll soon tire of doing this regularly. So what if you find yourself out in the woods and you don't have any flat chopping block to split wood on, and the saw you have is too small to cut any decent diameter chopping log? If you can find a sturdy dead tree on the ground, this is all you need to split down your firewood. Place the wood against the trunk of the tree, making sure that the top of the log is resting firm against the trunk. Keep your legs apart and bend your knees. Then simply swing down against the top part of the log, making sure you are driving the axe head towards the tree trunk. That way, if the axe misses, it buries into the tree trunk itself and not into the ground, or more importantly, not into your leg. Once you have split the round of the log, it is much easier to split it down further, as you have a flat surface to keep the log sturdy when resting against the trunk. I find this method a fast way of splitting logs, but it's always important to keep legs bent and drive the axe head towards the ground or tree trunk. The larger the log you are splitting it against, the safer it is. If the trunk on the ground has any form of springiness to it, don't use it and find something that is solid and doesn't move. Axe injuries often occur when the motion is repetitive and you are tired. It's easy to lose focus in that split second and cause something to go wrong. Often, this is when doing a simple task such as cutting kindling. Trying to split down logs into kindling by just holding your hand there and quickly moving it out of the way is something probably most of us have done or still do. But by just grabbing a loose piece of kindling and holding this against the upright instead, it will increase the distance of the axe head from your hand and greatly reduce the chance of injury. If you swing and miss, your hands are nowhere near the axe head. The best method I find for splitting down wood to kindling size is to hold the log parallel against the axe handle. Make sure that the cutting edge of the axe is directly over the middle of the log and the other end of the log is against the axe handle. I then wrap my fingers around the edge of the log to keep it firmly against this handle. Then it's just a case of bringing the axe and log down at the same time against the chopping block or solid log, and it should split straight along the middle. Once it has been split once, it's much easier to split into thinner pieces, as there will generally be a flat section for the log to sit against the chopping block. This method is a fast and efficient way of splitting wood down for kindling, and one that I use a lot when out in the woods. If you don't have your knife on you and all you have for a cutting tool is your axe, you can still accomplish the same tasks your knife can do. For example, to cut cordage, rest your axe between your legs with the cutting edge facing up, and then run your cordage along the edge to cut it. But be aware the cutting edge is facing you, so keep your fingers well clear of it. The carving hatchet I have has much less of a convex grind than my Hultifor's hunting axe. It has been designed to take chunks of material off small pieces of wood to make items such as bowls, cookers and spoons. Because of the profile of the cutting edge, it is generally much sharper than my larger axe. And in general, you should never leave the cutting edge of your axe exposed when it's sitting in a log. This can result in injury, especially if it's on the edge of a log where you or your dog could walk past it and catch yourself on it. However, in this instance, if you are working with the axe itself, you can actually use it to make feather sticks if you don't have your knife on you. This works well with a bearded axe, as it has more surface area on the cutting edge than a traditional forest axe. With the cutting edge exposed, I keep one hand on the handle of the axe to keep it steady, and with the other hand I run the stick along the cutting edge to create fine curls. This method gives you a lot more control to create fine curls than if you were running the axe vertically down the stick like you would with a knife. The same method can be done with a small forest axe or hunting axe. It's just that there is less surface area to work with. With the grind being slightly different to the carving axe, it produces much smaller curls, but these are still fine enough to take a spark from a fire still. Pounding in steaks with an axe or hatchet is something you have seen me do a lot on my channel over the years. People have very mixed opinions on this. Some say that it can deform the eye of the axe over time. Personally, if the pole of the axe is solid enough, then it should be able to handle it. Many axes nowadays have a larger hardened pole purely for this reason. Another question that I do get asked is how dangerous it can be with the cutting edge of the axe facing me. If it comes off, it could cause damage. If you watch my videos, you'll see that I tend to lean my head to one side when pounding steaks into the ground. Many people pound steaks in with the leather sheath still on the axe. I can tell you that from personal experience, I have had 3 leather axe sheaths destroyed from doing this. What happens is the force of the axe head hitting the steak sends shockwaves through the top of the leather sheath, and eventually the cutting edge of the axe will pierce through the stitching or rivets, and eventually the sheath will fail. Another method you could do is to turn the axe on its side so that the cutting edge is facing away from you. Often you will need an axe with more of a square cheek to it for this method to work well, but it can still be done. Often when making steaks, I will make a number of stepped slice cuts before making the main slice cut to remove the material. The stepped cuts allow you to take off much more material than simply slamming the axe down in one hard stroke. It also allows you to take a longer section of wood away. This not only works well when making points to a stick, but also when trying to cut a straight line when carving things like handles for spoons and spatulas. Axes can not only be used to fell trees, but also split large diameter logs in half. In this example, we're splitting a large cedar log with 2 axes and a number of wood wedges. The wood wedges not only help to prevent your axe getting stuck into the log, but they also encourage the log to split fairly evenly along the length. You can also use a large stick as a mallet to help drive the wedges and axe deeper into the wood. The wedges were made using an axe. In theory, this entire log could be split with just one axe, but we were splitting this log during the winter months and we had limited daylight hours to film, so naturally 2 axes were better than 1. And the last, and arguably the most important axe skill, sharpening. There are so many different ways to sharpen your axe, but the one I find works best for me is a sharpening puck. This is a circular sharpening stone with a coarse side and a smooth side. Whenever the cutting edge on my axe feels as if it's starting to go dull, I use this sharpening stone to bring it back to sharpness. Some people put oil on their sharpening stones, but for me I just either use a bit of water or some good old fashioned spit. I begin by using the coarse side of the stone and run it across the bevel in circular motions. The main difference I find with sharpening an axe compared to a knife is that the axe tends to have a large convex bevel. If you were just to focus on sharpening the cutting edge of the axe, then you would end up changing the profile of it and potentially creating a micro bevel. So with the axe, you need to cover the whole bevel and not just the cutting edge in order to keep the profile true. One side of the axe tends to be easier to sharpen due to the way you hold it. When I flip the axe round, I place the handle on my shoulder as close to my cheek as possible so that I can see down the edge of the axe. After using the coarse side, I flip the stone over to use the smooth side, and this is where the axe can be made much sharper. After a while, you will start to see a burr of small pieces of metal gathering on the cutting edge. This shows that you are removing material. Once both sides are done evenly and the edge is sharp, I finish it off by stropping the axe across a piece of leather to remove the burr and hone the edge. Sharpening an axe can be tricky. It's something that will get easier the more you do it, and the more you understand your particular axe profile. And that's it. 10 skills that you can do with a bushcraft axe or hatchet when out in the woods. Big thanks to everyone who watched this episode, and be sure to check out Bushcraft and Survival Skills playlist in the video description to watch more videos like this. Cheers for watching folks, and I'll see you in the next one.